Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Hey, welcome to Digital Currents. Today we have a really special treat. We are joined by Brian Riddick, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Upexi. They are one of our investments in Morgan Creek, and I have quickly become, as much as I can, a follower, a ambassador to all things Upexi, which involves a lot of Solana with what we're going to be talking about today. But first, I just want to welcome Brian to the show, and I'll give him a brief intro, as is my role here as host, to try and embarrass as much as I can our guests. No, I'm just kidding. We like to have a great time. Please welcome me in joining Brian Riddick over to Digital Currents. Brian's got a terrific background, transitioning from his days in Wall Street, working over at Citadel, and then really kind of transitioning from this research-based background and taking much more of an active hand in his investment career, and then joining the dark side, which is our side, the fun side, in crypto and into GSR. And then really kind of forming, and I'll let him tell you rather than me spoiling it up front, which led to another transition yet again, joining into UPXI. Brian, welcome to Digital Currents.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It is a true honor.
Fantastic. And I think when we set to chat, we were just really impressed in terms of this bridge that you brought, the idea of having kind of the traditional finance background, and then of course kind of all things DeFi. Maybe if you can just walk us a little bit through your background and kind of educate some of the folks and how you kind of came to this point in your career.
That's great. Yes. So I'd say I spent the bulk of my career on Wall Street, over a decade. I mostly managed a book of bank stocks, always in the long-short construct for different funds like Citadel, Millennium, and Balyasny. It was actually some of the companies that I covered, like Signature and Silvergate, that were the fiat on-off ramps for crypto, and that's when I went down the crypto rabbit hole. I quickly decided that it will take some time, but this is where everything will go, and wanted to be a part of it. So joined GSR, was there for 4 years, head of research, so I led their research function. And then as I had watched MicroStrategy over the decade, well, then really since they pivoted to their Bitcoin treasury strategy in 2020, and I saw all the value that they created for shareholders, started to think late last year, like, could we potentially do this on another asset? And so that's where I led the effort from GSR's standpoint. They were the lead for the big $100 million pipe investment into Upexi to bootstrap this Solana treasury strategy. And then just made a lot of sense for me to actually join Upexi and push on the crypto side of things and the fundraising side of things.
No, and I think, it's so funny going in reverse where, there's this saying that I love now. I know you're a proud dad of two, as am I. And the phrase I love is that youth is wasted on the young, right? But this idea that we kind of look back and describing our career makes perfect sense as we're now clairvoyant about the past. But clearly, as you're kind of navigating this, it's not always obvious, but the idea that you're covering both Signature, Silvergates, those were the critical players. So maybe tell us a little bit about, what they were doing back then. And of course, before some of the banking fiascos that kind of shook everything. that had to have been a really interesting experience.
It really was. But yeah, candidly, banks are boring. Crypto, I mean, crypto is innovating at the speed of light, and banks don't really change all that much. There are interesting things like on the regulatory capital side of things and different balance sheet dynamics. But actually, that is what really got me interested into MicroStrategy and was allowed me to internalize where all of these benefits actually come from, because MicroStrategy and these digital asset treasury firms are really just banks. So if you think about it, a bank is borrowing from depositors, pays a certain rate to depositors, and then it invests in loans and basically earns the yield on that loan. They make that spread, and then same thing with us. So we raise funds from the capital markets, we pay a certain cost of capital, and then we will invest that into Solana and earn a certain return on Solana. We make that spread. And so it actually is like a very similar construct. And then same thing with banks. Like if they issue equity above book, it is by definition accretive. We're in the fortunate position where we will trade at a much higher multiple to underlying book value. So that just means when we do raise funds, it is actually much more accretive than if a bank were to do it. And so I think like this background in covering balance sheet financials really enabled me to internalize where all this value creation comes from.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you described that, because, for the audience, every time I talk to Brian, I come away with a new learning, and that really kind of motivates me to think about what we just discussed, and better yet, kind of do something about it. Or, Mark, my co-host on Digital Currents, usually says, when he hears something the first time, doesn't always resonate or land, but by the second time, your ears start to perk up, and maybe you write it down, and, the third time, then you kind of take action and you start doing something about it. So this idea that, you are now working with banks that are not always known as being innovators, despite working with two that, we're very much on the cutting edge before their, epic collapses. And as we kind of transition into, this idea of jumping into the crypto world, it's where a lot of the change was occurring. That's actually where, on my background, starting in tech, going over to business school with the intention of going onto the investment side. And the best thing that I could think about was blockchain, AI, big data, things that I had been spending a lot of time on previously, with startups or with corporate companies, but figuring out that there was an enormous investment opportunity there, but also for the learning. And I think when you compare learning with something that's actionable, like an investment opportunity on these very specific windows, it's super motivating to kind of get to that next step. And perhaps with that, Brian, we can maybe discuss a little bit about the GSR time. And I think, very much we first got to know one another on some discovery calls. Over at Morgan Creek, we make a series of investments into, amongst other things, cryptocurrencies or related businesses. And on the call, there were many people on both teams, different investors. And Brian, you really stood out to me as somebody who had that bridge, of somebody who could speak both the traditional finance side as well as the DeFi side. Maybe just talking a little bit about the story about kind of how this came together. The idea that, you saw that MicroStrategy opportunity in what they were doing, adding value, but maybe on the Bitcoin side, it was a little oversaturated, and there was another opportunity for other cryptocurrency. Maybe talking about how this surfaced within GSR and how, you really helped drive what became a huge idea.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, so what I'd say is I'd always followed MicroStrategy and looked upon them very fondly just from all the value that they create. It's hard to argue that they haven't been wildly successful. So they have literally been the best performing stock since August 2020 when they moved to this Bitcoin treasury strategy. They're the second largest holder of Bitcoin behind only Satoshi. And at least last I looked, since August 2020, they had increased Bitcoin per share by something like 70% on an annual basis. So pretty phenomenal. And then I think that back in November, I was actually talking to Chris, our founder, just saying like, we should be doing something like this. And GSR is phenomenal. They're true crypto experts, and they do have this DNA rooted in a lot of blue blood TradFi firms. So like a lot of our management team does have that traditional finance expertise as well. And so they took it on full steam. Then what I'd say is like, in my mind, you've got Bitcoin as the best monetary asset, and then you've got Solana as the best high performance blockchain. And looking at where we'd want to, what asset we'd want to be underpinned by, it was a pretty easy decision for us, even though I am an enormous Bitcoin fan. And the reason why I say that is, number one, Bitcoin is already a $2 trillion asset. It's the seventh largest in the world. It will probably take immense sovereign buying for it to 5x anytime soon versus something like Sol. Number two, there are probably 20 MSTR copycats by now. I don't think we want to be the 21st. I'd rather be the canonical Solana treasury company. And then within the Solana side of things, like it just simply is, in my opinion, the best high performance blockchain. It's putting up similar or better metrics than all these other chains, sometimes at just a fraction of the market cap. And then what I'd say is that it really does have this thriving and large and growing ecosystem of users, developers, and dApps that I do think is unmatched amongst smart contract blockchains. So it was a pretty easy decision. And then from there, we contacted an investment bank. They put us in touch with Upexi that was actually moving towards this strategy already. So it just made a lot of sense for GSR to lead that investment. And yeah, the rest is history. GSR was the lead investor. And yeah, we were fortunate to raise 100 million. We hit like the full target. And we had 15 of the top venture capital firms, including Morgan Creek, come in, and they're providing us with a lot of support and give us a big leg up over some of our peers who are doing similar strategies.
Yeah, no, I mean, so much to unpack there. And it's definitely, again, one of these things that, looking at it in reverse, it seems so obvious now. However, I'd say even at the onset, we're pretty excited about what was coming together. I think probably giving a little bit of background in terms of like the alt space, we're at a point now, Brian, where the gap between Bitcoin and everything else is it's as big as it's ever been. So you can kind of look at that in one of two ways. Bitcoin is the only thing that has value, option one, or option two, there is a huge land grab up for the next platform to really seize their claim on everything else that could be a decentralized compute or even high performance compute as it kind of moves towards, being AI enabled or everything sort of resting on some degree of a public blockchain element, whether it's a layer one or a layer two that you spin out. But maybe zeroing in on this idea, because this is one thing that I asked GSR, well, isn't Ethereum supposed to be the next platform? Why not use that as the strategy? Maybe talking a little bit about, some of the conviction that you have around the Solana ecosystem in particular, and maybe, what do you see its role evolving into, especially as you have greater amounts of investors and eyes and attention from folks like yourself and the rest of the market?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And maybe I'll address like your comment on Bitcoin versus everything else first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So in my mind, like Bitcoin was obviously trying to be this digital payment system. It really optimized for decentralization and security at the expense of speed. So obviously, like it was really just not workable because it doesn't have high throughput to actually do that. And so it kind of morphed into the store of value. I do think like Bitcoin is this special snowflake and will be really tough to unseat in that regard. And then everything else I'm kind of looking at as like this computer in the sky. And so The reason why I moved into crypto is because I really strongly believe there are all these use cases and benefits that you can't get with incumbent technologies. So these are things like the removal of intermediaries. So you can trade on a centralized exchange and you can pay 1 full percent, or you can trade on a DEX and pay full 4 basis points. And so that obviously is like really powerful, and things should move that way over time. The second is democratization of value exchange. And I just look at traditional payments, and they are built on literally antiquated rails created in the 70s. And even fintech is just a front-end wrapper on that. And so, if I sent you $10 on Venmo, it would show up in your account immediately, but then actually on the back end, it just uses ACH. So whereas blockchain actually reimagines the rails themselves and uses internet-based and crypto-based rails. And so that will basically democratize value exchange. And then the last thing is just new constructs around ownership and governance and incentives that you just can't get with any other technology. So this is why I'm supremely confident it will happen. The reason why I don't think things have approached Bitcoin level yet is just because it takes time. It takes time for technology to reach its final form. So you have things like the internet, which was invented in the 80s, and it wasn't until the mid-2000s where you have user-generated content and social networks. And then similarly, it takes decades for people to change their behavior. So people still go into banks and deposit checks like physically when you could have done that on your phone 15 years ago. People still go into stores and like buy things in person for items that you could easily do on the internet, probably at a cheaper cost. And so it will just take time for us to get there, but I'm supremely confident we will. Last thing that I'll add around this before I get into Solana is that I don't think we could be better positioned. And the reason why I say that is the biggest thing in my mind that has always held crypto back is unclear rules and regulations in the US. And I think that we are going to get that next year with the market structure legislation that will actually pass. And the reason why this is so powerful, and this is a bit antithetical to crypto, but it will cause institutions to come in a big way. Right now, they kind of have a disincentive too, because if they do, they've got this great business already, and they could get sued, could get into trouble. But now, once it becomes legal and everybody knows what they can and can't do, they're kind of going to have to jump in a real way. And if they don't, they'll be disintermediated by their peers. They might as well disintermediate themselves. And the reason this is so important is just because it is like big tech, for example, who literally has billions of customers. They've got billions of dollars of capital. They've got a lot of top devs. They've got built-in trust. So you can imagine like if Google Chrome just added a built-in crypto wallet and then Amazon started to accept USDC, you would literally onboard billions of users immediately, and it would be this step change in functionality and usage. And I actually think we could be on the precipice of that. So I'm really excited for the future and our industry.
I mean, no, I think the folks and the listeners are starting to kind of see how your background is playing out in some of the strategy that you're not only, thinking about privately, but obviously bringing over to Upexi as, we're seeing this shift occur across digital assets. They're moving increasingly from, will this be a dying fad to, Bitcoin is the 7th largest asset in the world, right? To a, not a get off zero strategy, but it is very much now part of an active and even a passively managed strategy, which is pretty crazy considering where we are. So if you kind of think about, okay, if that becomes the gateway opportunity for us as folks involved in digital assets, now we're just kind of looking at, what are the risk return profiles of different assets as we would in any other asset class. So maybe talking a little bit about the ways that you guys see that balance between, the volatility and risk with some of those long-term strategic views that you're talking about as part of, the new role within UPXI, maybe things about the treasury management or the staking that you're kind of bringing natively within the structure, and kind of how you're planning to to get to that point?
Yeah. So what makes me so excited about digital asset treasury companies and Upexi in particular is just all the value that we could create both for shareholders and for the ecosystem itself. So on the shareholder side, I think that there are many different value accrual mechanisms that actually all compound. And so this is like what you're talking about. We have access to buying discounted locked SOL. Obviously, that will provide built-in gains for shareholders as that discount moves to par over time. We will stake our SOL. I mean, we do stake just about all of it. And what that does is it turns the treasury into a productive asset rather than just having it be something that is idle and sitting there. And then really where a lot of the magic happens is our ability to engage in capital markets issuance. And so this is where, when we trade above book, if we issue equity, it is by definition accretive. So MSTR, for example, if they issue equity at 2 times, they're essentially selling $1 for 2 or buying Bitcoin half off. It is roughly the same thing. Similarly for us, if we did another $100 million raise at a discount to where we are, even at 3 times, in theory, it should be 50% accretive and the stock should follow. So this is one big way that we can accrue value for shareholders. The other big way through capital markets is just convertible debt. Like MSTR really provided the playbook. We're following it and trying to improve upon it. But on the convertible debt side, we're basically giving the bond market access to Solana-like returns for the first time. And we're also enabling convertible debt arbitrage traders to actually monetize that volatility. So what they will do is they will delta hedge that implied option. And so they will actually basically sell Upexi stock high and buy it low. And so the more volatile the underlying is, the more money they can make. And what it does, it will result in free financing for us. To be clear, we don't have any convertible debt right now, but this is how the model works. It results in basically free financing. You set that conversion price to something that is an even greater premium to the current market price, so you can sell your stock at a higher price in the future, and then it actually delays your dilution as well. So there are all these really great benefits via intelligent capital markets issuance that we can do. So that's what gets me excited from the shareholder perspective. And then there are a lot of great benefits for Solana and the ecosystem itself as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great summary of kind of where we are right now in this market, where increasingly we're seeing digital assets behave like traditional assets because they will move into the capital market ecosystem that we have built for hundreds of years. And one of the things that really became the aha moment for me that you described for me several weeks ago was kind of understanding this concept that you just described of, hey, we have an asset that has volatility and there an implied high appreciation over time, and we're providing investors a vehicle to access that where they themselves may not have been able to access it before, because you guys are doing a couple of things. You are first identifying the asset they should be looking for. There are no shortages of cryptos or of blockchains that are claiming to be the best in their category. But I think, we've seen, many signals that point to Solana being one that has all the right ingredients to sort of take the mantle as, the kind of the application layer within crypto. But, the idea of being able to, buy discounted SOL, having that be unlocked for investors is something that has been somewhat limited for, let's say a retail investor or even an institutional investor. First, they have to understand it. First, they have to put in a bid. They have to identify and do diligence on the counterparty that they're interacting with. So maybe double tapping on how you guys have facilitated that and how that basically, bakes in a implied gain because of the process.
That's exactly right. So we have access to buy a lot of locked SOL at a big discount. That discount will fluctuate based on market conditions. Obviously, that discount gets to be larger when folks have a less positive view of the future. But regardless, like it actually fits perfectly with our buy and hodl strategy. So there's actually no reason for us not to buy Sol at a discount because we don't have plans to sell our Solana anyway. And then let's just say we can get it at a 15 to 20% discount. That's a built-in gain. Like the weighted average duration is roughly 1.4 years for most of this, which means that when you put that discount into some sort of yield equivalent, you are effectively doubling your staking yield. So like right now when we stake our Sol, if you just do that natively, you get 8%. But if you are basically adding in that discount to that yield, it basically will actually more than double it. And it's in a very risk prudent and safe manner that we're doing that.
No, I mean, I think it's definitely something extremely innovative, but then also something that has, some proof in the market, in terms of, maybe concluding this part of our chat with, describing what has already been done at UPXI and kind of what's to come. So you had this, highly successful event where you're able to raise, $100 million facility while still a GSR for the purposes of, buying Solana. You guys actually did that super fast as opposed to, many companies we work with that, they put together a strategy. They have somewhat unclear view of market and timing, and maybe something, goes upside down on them. But you guys were able to act pretty quickly, and, the market kind of responded in kind in terms of favoring that approach. What's kind of to come? What do you view success like to be in the next, let's call it, I guess, not really putting a timetable here, but kind of, let's call it the next phase of the Upexi journey. Now that you're kind of got off zero, you've transitioned from brands to blockchain, you've identified the structure, and you've put the team together in place.
Yes. So in my mind, there are two components to a digital asset treasury company. One is on the external visibility side of things, and then the other is on the intelligent capital issuance side of things. So we can and we will effectuate that in a big way on both sides of it. And so if for us to be successful, like we need to be out there and we need everybody to know about Upexi, and to, if they want to access Solana, to at least give them the option to do it in the form of like this familiar equity security that has multiple value accrual mechanisms that could potentially perform even better than just buying Sol itself. And so we need to really raise our visibility and raise demand for the stock, essentially. And then the second component is this intelligent capital issuance. This is really key. And this is where, like, if we can continue to raise funds and a lot of funds at this premium to book value, that's where, like, you start to really see our Sol per share rise, which is the key metric that we look at. And that's where, like, the stock price should follow. And you can actually get into this virtuous capital markets flywheel where, like, you have this multiple, you leverage that multiple for the benefit of shareholders via intelligent capital issuance. That should cause the stock price to rise and continue to support the multiple. And then you just continue to move around and around. So for me, I would define success as significantly increasing visibility as well as continued capital issuance in an accretive fashion for shareholders.
Love it. I love it. Well, we'll transition then. Maybe we'll kind of ask one interesting question in the lightning round that can kind of bridge the two. But we've kind of gotten to the point of our show, Brian, where we like to let our hair down a little bit, have a little bit of fun, get to know you a little bit better. Mark is not here, so I will do the heavy lifting of doing the lightning round, which, we'll ask you a couple questions to get you to open up a little bit with our audience, if they would love to know you, not just through this new role, but kind of, who is the man behind the title. So maybe kind of opening up with one question, where do you go to escape when you need to get away?
Play with my daughters. So you mentioned before, but I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and playing with them and spending time with them and my wife is what I do really to have fun. So I really have two things that I do. One is crypto, and now I guess crypto/traditional finance, and spend time with family. And so that's what both of those things make me really happy.
Oh, I love that and completely agree. Completely agree. And I think it'll be very interesting once your kids know more about crypto. So you'll have kind of the worlds collide, right?
It's
What would
funny.
you go ahead?
My wife is in traditional technology, and I'm not allowed to talk about crypto. So I think she's like done with hearing me talk about it. So, but yes, we'll be teaching my girls about it for sure.
And what is one thing that you read consistently, maybe on a daily basis, that you just can't live without?
So I just read so much crypto news. I'd say I actually really like GSR's daily market update. They summarize the news in a very efficient manner. So it's literally like fragments of a sentence. So that's one thing that I read to keep myself informed, and it cuts the amount of reading that I need to do from literally 2 hours down to like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I'm really well informed of everything within crypto. But I'd just say like bigger picture, I just consume like every podcast I can, including like Digital Currents, which is one of my favorites for sure. And then what I'd say is like the reason why that format works really well for me is like I could be doing the dishes, or I could be holding my 4-year-old at night when she's sick. And it just enables me to really stay super informed and up to date on everything that's happening.
Yep. And I think, the idea that we are constantly learning while we're doing other things, the multitasking is real. And thanks so much for the kind words about the podcast. We're so happy you could come and join us. Maybe another question would be, what is the one quality, if you had to kind of pick one, that you think makes for a great investor?
I would say, to be honest, hard work. Because I actually think like someone that works really hard and does that consistently over time, it compounds. So I'm a big believer that maybe some people are naturally born smarter or not, but if you work really hard, and this is kind of like Kobe's Mamba mentality, but like it literally will all add up. And then if you do that every single day, the gap between, some investor and like the next closest person is just going to be so large that they can't catch up. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer that everything is about like your skills and knowledge, and like you acquire that through hard work. So to me, it's someone who's just going to continue to push as hard as possible and consistently over long periods of time.
I love that. I love that. And it definitely is the element of a little bit of the Malcolm Gladwell in the answer, right? The kind of the famed 10,000 hours where you just can't fake your way there. You kind of have to have your battle scars to get the necessary learning to be able to come to that insight and have that appear natural when in actuality it's been well earned. Maybe kind of going in a slightly different direction, Brian, I was kind of thinking a little bit about capital markets, as I often tend to do. I know you do as well. One kind of different thing that I started seeing in Solana was this idea of bringing a capital markets ecosystem to the on-chain world. And so the idea that companies could IPO, or at least have a portion of their shares be tradable in Solana. Now, this could be a big thing, or this could be nothing. But what I think at a minimum is it's giving companies something else to talk about, where previously there was only one path for liquidity. Did you have any thought about kind of exits or IPO type of structures on chain? Obviously, investors in Solana, has this been something that's even been on your all's radar?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of companies that are trying to do this. So you have like Republic or Echo.xyz, and that they're basically trying to bring back ICOs. I do think like it could be a more fair way for companies to actually raise funds, and a lot of big benefits to doing so. I think that there hasn't exactly been a lot of regulatory clarity I think like now there are some platforms that can do it in a fully regulatory compliant way. And then I think it'll just like take time for things to move that way. But I think one huge advantage that Solana has is it's moving towards internet capital markets. Its stated goal is to essentially be NASDAQ on-chain and to propagate state globally at the speed of light. I think it does that better than any other blockchain out there. And so finance is one of the big key areas that I think Solana is really well positioned to capitalize on. But there's so many, like there's this saying called OPAS, only possible on Solana. That, it really is, you're seeing a lot of deep in projects migrate there, like Helium and Render. You have like, it is the home for AI agents. It's the home for meme coin trading. There's just so many things. So I think it is exceptionally well positioned for this internet capital markets revolution that will happen over time, including fundraising. But really, there's just so many different areas that I think can move on chain.
Got it. And probably we'll get you out on this one question, Brian. So one of your old bosses is somebody who we all know of pretty well, Ken Griffin over at Citadel. Now, he is known for many things, some kind of quirky stories through the years of trading stocks, at Harvard dorm room, installing the satellite dish on the top, to obviously his portrayal in Hollywood, where you kind of blend pop culture and finance. What is the funniest Ken Griffin story that you can share?
There's a couple of Ken Griffin stories, and we might want to edit this out, but I had previously only seen him multiple times in the restroom, which is like not the best place to see somebody. But and then what I'd say is he spoke to all the analysts at Citadel, and he had a very, I'd say, intense kind of prep speech for everybody, which was actually quite interesting because after Citadel actually moved to Balyasny to manage a bank book for a financials team there, and their founders met with the analysts as well, and it was like just a very different message, but obviously like both have been uber successful, multiple ways to do things. But I think Ken's was much more along the lines of like, we had to push incredibly hard and take no prisoners and we will win type thing, which obviously has worked out incredibly well for them and the firm. So
excellent. So a little bit of his Winston Churchill, style there, kind of, motivating the troops. I think, there's definitely a side of me, at least, that like responds to that, kind of growing up in sports in the athletic world. But we want to thank you, Brian, for joining us today. You've been incredibly gracious with your time. And I think that whether it's been kind of recognizing that there are moments in anybody's career where you can continue where you're doing, you've had success, or you spot an opportunity and you take a little bit of a risk. I think, listeners can kind of listen to our chat and draw some inspiration about, the latter approach and how that can really provide, not just something lucrative, which is, what we're doing, exchanging, value for dollars, but also something very rewarding. And I think kind of you were talking about how it's been an incredibly rewarding part of your life as it begins something that's extremely interesting and novel and pushing that background. So we'll have to thank you so much and invite you again once the further milestones get unlocked, to use a gaming metaphor that Solana is probably very familiar with. And we will remind our listeners, as always, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends about the podcast. That's how we've amplified our message. And to remind our listeners, as always, to stay current.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.